These days, I've started appreciating slower, more peaceful movies more than I ever did before. These kind of movies are hard to stick to if you're not a complete cinephile, because many mainstream movies set an expectation that a great movie will either have you on the edge of your seat or scratching your head trying to figure out what it all meant, or make you cry given the overwhelming tragedy of the story.
I could have got one more person, and I didn't.
On the other hand, you have movies that do take their sweet time in telling a story with a slow pace that allows you to be completely immersed in their world. But these are hardly accessible to a more general audience. I hadn't even heard of most of these until I started making reviews. So today, after gaining a slight appreciation for slower paced movies, I wanted to talk about a movie that I had seen before I started this channel, liked it, but could never really comprehend what was so good about it.
You shouldn't do that.
I'm talking
Tap the glass.
about Mr. Holmes.
How did you know I was going to?
See, Sherlock Holmes stories have been around for a really long time, and because of that, anyone who's gonna read or watch anything about him is going to have some preconceptions about what it's going to be like. There's going to be an eccentric genius who is rude to everyone.
Weren't exactly sympathetic.
He doesn't come to me for sympathy.
He's gonna have a friend named Watson who is... We're gonna get into Watson's role in the stories in some time. The stories themselves are mostly episodic, although BBC's Sherlock tries to tie it all together by keeping Moriarty common in many of the episodes. And unless it's some sort of a special that builds a significant character arc, they all glorify Sherlock's mind, despite his emotional shortcomings. This is how we have been passively trained to see Sherlock Holmes. The rude, sometimes even heartless detective using his genius to solve all sorts of crime, while others gaze at him with shock and awe. In Mr. Holmes, however, we see a decaying, more vulnerable Sherlock. The movie is based on the book A Slight Trick of the Mind, where Holmes is 93 years old and has retired to a peaceful life in his country home in Sussex. He works on his apiary while the housemaid and her son Roger help him around. But there's a problem. The mighty Sherlock Holmes is starting to forget things.
All right, Roger.
The movie has 3 stories. One of his recent trip to Japan where he tries to find a treatment for his forgetfulness, which is hinted to be a more serious degenerative disease. Another is of the last case he worked on, and the third is of the present, where he's trying to use the treatment to try and remember the details of his last case, trying to remember what happened that made him retire. Intercutting between the 3 stories can be a bit jarring, but I believe it's intentional to put us in a similar headspace as Sherlock himself, who is confused by what he can remember and what he cannot.
I must finish with you before I die.
What is common in all the 3 stories is the absence of his iconic partner Watson. In the stories that have come before, Dr. Watson's presence functions as the audience's proxy, asking the questions we want the answer to.
What on earth does that mean? Abbas Lane.
In addition to that, him being the normal guy allows for us to compare Holmes with others and see for ourselves how differently he thinks. Watson also softens the blow of every mean thing that Sherlock says so that we're not too antagonized by him. Removing Watson from the story also removes his admiration and astonishment for the great detective and everything that he does. Because when Watson steps away, what we see is
The Man Beyond the Mist, which I wrote. I thought I was rather good.
You do away with that veil of admiration for the genius. You allow Holmes to have a character arc that stands apart from other iterations of many of his stories.
Go after him. Apologize for saying things that were meant to hurt. You were cruel. If you don't apologize, you will regret it.
It is only when Sherlock is properly hurt that he can properly heal. Sherlock being completely on his own means that we witness him absorbing the blow of the consequences of everything he says and does.
I'm his mother!
There's no holds barred in the retaliation. Making a cold, rational person learn the value of emotions and empathy is difficult. Even more so when the character has been seen that way for almost a century. With Watson out of the picture and Sherlock's rudeness being what it is, any change that he needed would have to come through his interactions with another character, someone who is new to him and would compel him to be softer than usual. This is where Roger comes in. The housekeeper's son is a curious and smart kid who repeatedly questions Sherlock about his past, what his last case was, and how he came to the deductions that he did.
The cane shows the marks of a dog's teeth. The wood is from an island southwest of Madeira. That thing.
As Sherlock is forced to be somewhat protracted in his explanations, there's almost a meditative quality to the things that he recollects, as if there's a slight observance on his part about what he had done or said and whether it was right. Sherlock's recollection of the past events goes parallel to his life in retirement with Roger, and as all the storylines come to their climax, Sherlock finally realizes something that he had never understood before: that sometimes logic fails to help people. Sometimes he needs to be a good person before he can be a great detective. It's not an easy thing to learn, and as Sherlock slowly remembers, it took something really traumatic happening, something which all his perfect deductions and observations couldn't prevent, that led him to retire from his profession. I don't want to spoil what mistake he realizes at the end of the movie that he had made, but I'm worried the secrecy might make you expect a big mind-bending twist or reveal which you don't get in this movie. That's because it doesn't need to rely on those tactics. Ian McKellen's acting, the structure of the story, and the pacing all work together phenomenally to bring you a kind of Sherlock Holmes that you've never seen before. I think it's a lovely movie and I want you to see it. Let me know in the comments below which Sherlock Holmes version is your favorite and why. Share this video with anyone you think might enjoy this sort of a movie, and subscribe to this channel if you want more videos like this.